orthopedic hand surgeon's reaction, Dr. Richard Moore. In terms of trial strategy, I think he gave a strong start for Heard's team. The subject was also pertinent. Was Johnny telling the truth about how he suffered in terms of his severed finger? His story was that, Johnny Depp's story was that Amber threw a bottle at him and that's how it came off. And the original story he actually told the emergency doctors in the emergency hospital was that the finger, I think, got trapped in the accordion of the door. And I've got to say, I've gone and had a look at the property in Australia, and I don't really see the sort of thing that I'm expecting to see, which is sort of a security door that's sort of got a, it sort of goes like an accordion. There is, however, a glass door that's got sort of, looks like it might open and sort of cross over one another, almost like a window. That's the closest I could see to an accordion type door. Maybe I didn't see all the doors there. I don't know what you guys think. Maybe there isn't an accordion door. But in a case that seems to have many twists and turns, whether it's about poop on a bed or a dislodged splinter from a bed, this feels a lot like that. It's either this way or it's that way. And so the question is, did she cause him to lose his fingertip, or did he? What actually happened? Like at the end of the day, what is reality in terms of this? So I'm going to give you my assessment, then I'm going to go through the hits from Rottenborn, then the misses, and then also Vasquez, the attorney on Depp's side, what she got right and what she didn't get right. So just a quick hi to some of you guys in chat, Laurie Markle, Elena Schaefer, Ramblin' Rome, good to see you guys. Okay, so without any further ado, let's get going. So my assessment is, I think the first point to make is that a severed fingertip indicates that we're dealing with at least one very serious injury, right? We're not talking about a bruise. We're not talking about a stubbed toe. We're not talking about, what else is there? Not that this is minor, but hair pulled out. This is something where there is no question that there's blood and gore, and it's a pretty serious injury. It obviously requires hospitalization. Good to see you. Karina, also good to see you. Nashama Batami, also good to see you from Florida. So just in a simple way, that the sheer fact that a body part is removed reveals, I think, the level of danger hanging like a cloud over the scalp. So I don't think you can minimize that. Whether you're on one side or the other, personally, I don't like taking sides. Bria, good to see you as well. Bria from France. Whether you're on one side or the other, and I don't think you should take sides. We should try and be objective for as long as we possibly can. You can see that there's a cloud of danger hanging over both people. And within that scenario, somebody actually loses a body part, right? And so you can almost imagine if all things being equal, they just continued on together, how much worse could things have gotten? And I think the answer is worse. What that worse is, I don't know, but it certainly would have gotten worse. Then I just want to refer to not sure if it's an email or a text. I guess it's a text. It says outgoing to Dr. David Kipper, sent at 5 o'clock on is it the 7th of March, 2015? And it's quite a lot there, but it basically says, I cut the top of my finger off. And he talks about Amber in sort of disparaging terms. So you don't get the sense that he's defending Amber, and then part of that defense is saying, I cut my finger off. You kind of get the idea that he's not very happy with her, and I cut the top of my finger off. I also think it's hard to get around, as I say, the fact that Johnny, in his own words, said that he cut his own finger off. Now, when Johnny was asked this, he said, when you say, I got my finger cut off, it doesn't necessarily mean you've done it yourself. I was in that situation once where I said something like, I cut myself, but what I meant was I got cut, kind of thing. So I kind of know what he's saying there, but I'm not sure if I accept that. He also added that, intentionally cutting off his finger was unthinkable as a guitar player. I think that's a great point that he makes. On the other hand, I don't think that either way that the cutting off of the finger was intentional. So whether you want to say Amber threw the vodka bottle with the intent of slicing his finger off, I don't think that's true. And if you want to say Johnny wanted to cut his finger off, I don't think that's true either. I think however it happened, it's an accident. Does that make sense? Sky, good to see you here as well. So in sum, I would say reasonable doubt exists on whether Amber did this to Johnny and equally on whether he did this to himself. But I would also say Johnny's version that his finger was sliced off by a shot of glass from a quote-unquote exploding bottle sounds in the main, for the reasons testified to that I'm going to get to now, unlikely. So let's just do a quick poll from you guys. Do you think Johnny lost his finger due to glass or a bottle or something else? So if you think it was glass or a bottle, put a 1, and if it was something else, put 2. Just quickly get a sense of where you guys are. Miss Gents, good to see you here as well. Jennifer puts a 1, so you think it's a glass. Hot Rod said absolutely an accident. Tammy says a bottle. Terry says number 1. So I've seen quite a lot of 1s, which is that you think it's a bottle, and there are a couple of 2s as well. Laurie says, I believe they're both guilty. Okay. Terry Dean says glass seems likely. It appears in every fight. It's a good point. There is evidence of broken glass. There's a lot of broken bottles. So that's a good point. Can you guys see me okay? Because it's certainly buffering on my side where I'm looking at it on my computer. So it's actually kind of a mixed bag. It almost seems like 50-50. Angelique Schmidt says 1. The Amazing Tiff says 1, a bottle and an accident. Okay, so maybe more of you think that Johnny's version is accurate and, the right version. Catherine says broken bottles were in the photo. We're going to get to that. Okay, C and you're fine. Okay, that's cool. Okay, so we're going to now deal with Rottenborn's hits, the things that he addressed that I think were on point. So the moment Rottenborn started his direct examination, this was after establishing Dr. Moore as an expert, and you know that the next doctor that did the same thing first established his credentials, have him accepted also by opposing counsel as an expert. So as soon as he started his direct examination on the issue of the hand injury, Camille Vasquez did what she does best, interrupt and interject and sort of undermine and spoil the sort of momentum and the conversation, the point that's being made. And each one that I counted was overruled. So certainly in that opening, each time she objected, the judge overruled what she said. So a good start from Heard's counsel, not such a great start, not that it's a start, it's really just trying to have an impact, have an influence, but not such a great start from their side. If you're going to object, then you really want to object and it's sustained, not object and it's overruled, especially not sort of over and over again. Susie says throwing a bottle is an accident. Okay. Dr. Moore made a compelling argument that not a single sliver of glass was mentioned anywhere in the literature, meaning when the doctors wrote their reports, and what I understand was that it was more than 1, nowhere did they mention removing splinters of glass or fragments of glass. either from Johnny's finger, the finger that was injured, or from the rest of his hand, or from even his clothing. And also, it seems unreasonable to imagine that if glass was flying and exploding everywhere, this was actually Johnny's word. I'm not sure if he said exploded or shattered. If you guys just bear with me, you can actually listen to a brief description of Johnny saying exactly what happened. So if one of you wants to do that, just let me know. Does he say shattered or exploded? It's basically the same thing, isn't it? But you can actually, and I think it is important to do that, get Johnny's version and then interrogate that, juxtapose that right next to what you're doing here, right? So I do think that that Rottenborn used the word exploded. But anyway, if it's exploded or shattered, the point is, if glass is flying all over the place, how do you only injure one finger? So in other words, glass is literally flying in every direction. How is it that one finger is injured extremely badly and there's nothing, there's not a cut, there's nothing, not a nick on any of the other fingers, right? And so I think that is quite a compelling argument for this idea that it couldn't have been glass, because you would expected fragments and also injuries on the other fingers, given that sort of situation. So Dr. Moore also made, I thought, a cogent argument that a projectile hitting the finger from above, meaning kind of from the outside, so it's basically this way. In other words, not from that way, from this way. So on the back side of the hand, or what he referred to as the dorsal side. So this is what I would just say the palm side or the underside. He was saying that it very likely was struck from this side, right? And if you look at the clip that I've just provided, Johnny Depp shows the dorsal side as well. So he shows his hand like this on the bar counter, and then later on he shows his hands like that, and then later on he shows sort of one finger on and one finger off or something like that. So it's kind of a combination. But the point is that he's showing that it's this side that is facing whatever is coming to it, that is striking it. And when he actually shows and demonstrates the object hitting his finger, he shows it on the dorsal side. That's the point to make. The problem is the injury is on this side. The problem is that the injury is on the middle finger, under the fingernail, with a lot of the skin over here removed. One of the reasons I didn't want to do edited videos, because if you put up those sort of images, they get your video gets demonetized, and I'm sure you've seen them anyway. It's also a quicker way just to explain this in a way that's more, I guess, explicable. So that I thought was quite a good point, is that Johnny actually shows that the injury is on the dorsal side, this side, but the actual injury is on the other side. So there's already inconsistency. He also talks about the fingernail remains. There's no injury to the fingernail. The fingernail is not cracked. The fingernail is present. The fingernail is not dislodged. It's just like a chunk of the finger under the fingernail is kind of gone, kind of shattered, right? Not cut, shattered. And the doctor actually described it as a crushing type injury, not a cutting type injury, because the bone is actually crushed. Now, when you cut something and it cuts into bone, it's either going to cut through the bone or it's going to cut until it gets to the bone. And you can't really imagine glass, and this wasn't actually addressed in the testimony, you can't really imagine glass cutting through a bone, because bone tends to be quite strong relative to glass. But I guess you could make the argument that if it's a very thick glass, like a sword of a whiskey bottle, anything's possible. Anyway, I think Rottenborn scored a point when he raised doubt about the broken vodka bottle. That was from Vasquez's words in the bar area. So in other words, in her cross-examination, Vasquez sort of pointed to the sort of corner area and sort of said, isn't that a broken bottle? And to me, it looks like it could be a broken whiskey glass. Some whiskey glasses have got quite a reinforced bottom. But as far as I know, Johnny Depp said it was a really big bottle of vodka. And he was saying, if that is a bottle of vodka, it's a sort of a smaller bottle, a 750 milliliter or something. And I tended to agree with that. I thought it did look like glass, but on close inspection, it actually looks like literally a glass, but a glass of glass, if that makes sense. Finally, while Rottenborn proceeded with his examination of Dr. Moore, Vasquez could be seen frantically paging through her notes. So I thought that was quite a good sign that the Heard's counsel were doing something causing the other counsel to sort of try and catch up. So, they didn't know that this witness was going to be called, I presume. And so she was really quickly paging through her notes. He also didn't know exactly perhaps what he was going to be testifying about. But then let's go to Rottenborn's misses. So I often find when experts present, I've sat in on a couple of trials, while the lawyers may be familiar with the jargon, while some people who are a little bit more au fait with certain aspects, and it could be anything, it could be DNA, it could be ballistics, but in this case it's medical terminology. But sometimes even media folk, they may not be familiar with what certain things mean. And in the process of trying to work out what that word is, like a contusion, not that that's a terribly difficult one, but there's another word that he used, what was it? Not contaminated. Do you guys, or communated, what is that word that he used? I don't have it in front of me. Yeah, I don't know. It's basically just a fancy medical word for a fracture, as far as I know. But anyway, if you guys can think of the word, just put it in chat and I'll have a look at it. I can see the word in my mind. It's like C-O-N or C-O-M, contaminated or something. But anyway, that really just makes my point, is you're still trying to figure out what the word is, and he's moved on to something else, and it's just confusing. So I would have made more effort to explicate Dr. Moore's answers in the common vernacular. And I think he could have dumbed it down even further than what he did. I know he attempted to do that. No, not contusion. Something like starts with a C. I also think he could have asked the obvious, like, what do you think happened? So if you don't think it was glass or a whiskey bottle, what do you think happened? Probably Vasquez would have objected on the grounds of speculation. I don't know if it's speculation if you're asking an expert for his expert opinion. And I still think that was an important question. Okay, you'd think that didn't happen, so what do you think did happen, right? Valley says it was glass, compound fracture. No, it's a single word. I think it starts with C-O-N. I just can't think of the word right now. But I think it's got to do with fractures. Anyway, so it's not a very common word. It's not used in our it's not used colloquially. So I think he should have sort of spoken a bit more about what he thought was more likely. No, not concussion, no. Something like contumated something like that. Something sounds a little bit like that. I also think it was a mistake not to replay the audio of Johnny's testimony. to refresh the jury's memory, to say, okay, this is what he said, and it's actually something else, right? Yeah, I think that's it. Comminuted. We just get the definition of it. I think it sounds pretty close. Yeah, to comminute is to produce multiple bone splinters. That is it. Well done. Nice one. Comminuted, that's it. Not a word that you see very often. So that is like a word you want, if the doctor says it, you want to be very clear of what it means. Otherwise, the jury gets stuck just kind of going like we have right now. Simple things like that I see very often happening in trials, where the lawyer may be aware of what the word means and they have a nice conversation, but they leave everyone else behind. It happens a lot. Just look at some of your questions. Thanks a lot for that, Terry. Valley View Sue says that doctor was proven to be paid by Amber's team. He was completely biased. It was exactly as described. A bottle thrown and it sliced his finger. Let's not go into CTs. Okay, so Valley View Sue, I don't know how to say this other than just to say it. Any expert tends to be a paid expert. You have it on both sides. So if you had a doctor on Johnny Depp's side, he would more than likely be paid. So I don't really understand that. So I guess you can say, so he was paid, so that's how he was incentivized. I actually thought that was a cheap shot from Depp's counsel, because instead of arguing the point, Sagedi Nona, good to see you. I see you wrote it down in your notes. That's great. Instead of arguing the merits of the argument, you try and undermine the whole thing and sort of dismiss it that way, which I think is just a bit of a cop-out. I actually thought that was a cheap shot from the next guy who testifies well probably was also paid. I don't know. But as soon as you do that, you are, as far as I'm concerned, you're admitting that you don't really have much substance to argue about. And to be honest, I'm not surprised. I mean, I'm not surprised that you have certain experts, whether they DNA, whatever they paid, and you get experts for one side and experts for the other side. I didn't think that the expert after Dr. Moore was particularly good, though. Okay. So, as I say, I think it was a mistake not to replay the audio of Johnny's testimony to refresh the jury's memory. I also think what they should have done was demonstrate in court where and how his fingers were on the surface of the bar counter. And if you're not sure of that, if you're not sure where his fingers were when he sort of demonstrated it, you can go to this link and check it out. You see him actually demonstrating it. Okay. So just the pictures I've got in front of me, you can see Johnny with his hands like this, that are sort of flat on the counter, both hands. So he's got both hands flat on the counter. Then there's another one where his hand's actually outside of the view of the live feed, but it looks like he's got most of his hand on the counter and then just the edge of it off, right? But the fact that it's cut off there means you can't quite see what is going on. It doesn't look like it could be on the edge there, but if you were watching the live feed, and I presume Dr. Moore was, you can't quite see that, right? And then there's another scene, and again, you can see it in the link that I provided, where he's sort of sitting to the side with his arm like this, and he's got the little finger and this finger sort of on the surface of the table or the counter, and then the middle finger is sort of the first one that is hanging down, or maybe arguably the second one that's hanging down, but certainly hanging down more than the second finger. And then the other fingers you can't really see. And then there's also one scene where he's showing his hand like this, and he's showing where the bottle hit his hand. The point is he's showing it's this side of his hand, not this side. The point is that he's showing that there's wood behind his hand, right? The count is here, and whatever hit his hand there, right? And, you know, you can go through the extended version yourself and familiarize yourself. But anyway, I thought that was a bit of a mistake not to be more explicit about what he was saying. Just to be practical in your testimony. So that now brings us to Vasquez's hits, the things that I think she got right. So the moment Dr. Moore proceeded with his evidence, Johnny looked up. And I also noticed him looking at Dr. Blow, it's not Blofeld, is it? Blow something. Anyway, the doctor who's just testified. By the way, I don't really give his testimony any, to me, it's really not even worth examining. I just thought it was rubbish. Not like all of it doesn't mean anything, but I don't think it helped Amber Heard's case, and I don't know what the jury are going to make of it, to be honest. Anyway, but the moment Dr. Moore proceeded with his evidence, Johnny looked up and stared right at him. This and Vasquez's hand on the trigger, you know, of the mic, common neuter, that's at early winter. Sunflowers, good to see you here. Momo, shark, smaller parts or fractures, yeah. Johnny looked up and stared right at him, and I think this was part of strategy because it is a opposing side's witness. You want to make him feel uncomfortable. You want to make him feel pressure, and I'm sure that he did. Bear in mind, it's not just Johnny looking at you. It's the whole persona around it. It's a powerful individual. It's a individual with a lot around him, in a sense, and also ostensibly a wealthy individual, a very wealthy individual. At one point, Johnny Depp was one of the highest paid actors in Hollywood, right? And so this guy's staring right at him, and then there's a point where he stops looking at him and, you know, does other things. So I thought that was quite interesting. You know, there's quite a lot of body language there as well. There's also the body language of when they arrived in court, when Johnny Depp arrived in court and Amber Heard, they look as though they are winning. They've got these winning smiles. They hug and almost like they're congratulating their team. The whole idea is to create this impression that things are going well. I don't know whether one can say that for either of them based on what's going on, you know, just generally. Anyway, I think Vasquez's hand on the trigger was also calculated to fluster the surgeon. The fact that she's got her hand there and you would be noticing it, it's going to make you nervous. It's going to, if you see the hand move, it's like, whoa, you know. So it's literally almost like having someone hold a gun on you and then cock back the trigger. And then, okay, what you said didn't warrant me doing that, so I'll cock the trigger forward a bit. Oh, and I'm going to cock it back. It's a little bit like that. So although all of this, I think, was calculated to make Dr. Moore nervous, I'm not sure if it did. I think it was quite effective in theory, but whether it worked, I'm not sure. Overall, I was impressed by what Vasquez achieved during a cross-examination. I thought Rottenborn did a good job, and I was like, wow, I'd like to see what she can get out of this kind of thing. And so I was quite impressed that she did do quite well. She established some doubt about the doctor's knowledge of the case, both by noting his description of Depp's fingers, that I thought was a sign of someone who knows their case very, very well. The fact that she could think of such detail, remember such detail, that shows a legal person who has got great attention to detail. You know, like she didn't need to go home and do her homework. She knew that off the top of her head. I also thought that emphasizing that he didn't evaluate Depp's fingers personally or directly, I thought that was kind of sensible line of attack, like a sensible way to address it. But to be clear, a lot of situations like this, nobody is present. It's Amber and Johnny and nobody else. So anytime you're going to make that argument, well, you weren't there. It's not. You know what I mean? It's a little bit insensible. She also raised the issue of the bottle hitting the finger from an angle. I thought that was quite clever. I sort of also went, oh, well, does that change things? And putting that little bit of doubt in the jury's mind, that's quite a good tactic. The fact is, though, when you look at the hand, the way that he demonstrates it, it doesn't really matter what the angle is, it's still going to be from the front. So whether it was from a 0-degree angle or a 2-degree angle or 90-degree angle, it's still going to hit the hand from the front. I don't think you can sort of make the case that the bottle hit the back of the counter and ricocheted off and hit his finger from the back anyway. I don't think you can make that case. Johnny himself showed that it hit the front of his finger. And that's kind of the crux, is that Johnny's own version in court, he demonstrates an object hitting the front of his finger, and the medical expert makes quite a good case to say the injury appears to be on the back of the finger. So the other thing is her circumstantial observations were on point. I thought the tissue on the floor surrounded by glass and looked like red droplets, I thought that was an effective argument. She also showed photos there. So you're kind of getting a bit of a context there, and it seems quite compelling. She also spoke about, I think, the finger being found in the kitchen, and so it gives that a sense of context that I thought was quite good. Some of the misses from Vasquez, Suzanne, it's not contusion, it's comminuted, which means reduced to minute particles or fragments. So her misses, at one point, Vasquez objected to her own words as hearsay. So I think what happened was Rottenborn, there was a point where Vasquez cut off Dr. Moore, right? Like kind of quoted him, but selectively. And then on redirect, Rottenborn quoted Vasquez, and then she kind of objected to what he was saying based on her own words, saying hearsay, and she just said them, which just seemed a little bit like being a little bit, what's the word, pedantic, being a little bit like hyper strict, unnecessarily hyper strict. She also got a page number wrong, and you might say that's a ridiculous criticism, but that normally wouldn't mean anything. If anyone gets a page number wrong, you might say, not a big deal. But given Vasquez's standards, when she's cross-examining, and if you say a word wrong, objection, for precision and perfection, it didn't look terribly good that she made an error, given that she's expecting perfection from the other side. I also felt her tone towards, this is my personal feeling, I thought her tone towards the doctor was unnecessarily scathing and sharp. In a case that's ostensibly about her client being bullied by a woman, she was coming perilously close to doing the same in court, I thought. Yeah, you are, this is an expert witness, it's a doctor. And just the sharpness of the tone, I thought was, and I understand it's part of what makes her an excellent lawyer, excellent counsel, but I thought it was a little bit too unnecessarily sharp, almost vicious sometimes. And I just thought that was just my personal opinion. When Vasquez did her cross-examination, she also spoke sharply and tried to cut the doctor off, particularly where she selectively chose a section from one of his answers. And I think if she had allowed that to be completed, if she just let him speak a little bit more or read a little bit further, Rottenborn wouldn't have had the opportunity to sort of strike back. That would have been taken out of that. So if he just gave a little bit of leeway, it would have taken that out of his counter. So one of the things, I'm going to deal with my conclusion now in a second, but one of the things that I thought was basically the bottom line with this whole thing was that this orthopedic surgeon said that no shards of glass were found embedded in Johnny Depp's main finger. There were also no lacerations documented anywhere on any other fingers. And that's also where I think they could have taken a closer look at photos and sort of looked and said, do you see anything, any kind of cuts or anything on any of the other fingers? And the fact is you would have expected that. Somebody said, I'm sure that happened because you see glass everywhere. Well, using that same logic, if there's glass everywhere, why is only one finger injured in a situation like that, right? And so that now brings us to the conclusion of this analysis. I think there was a failure from Rottenborn and the doctor, Dr. Moore, in my view, to just simply state that the wounds to the skin weren't consistent with cuts from glass. So in other words, you don't actually have to go into all the detail that they went into. You can simply say, does the skin look like it's been sliced, or does the skin look like it's been something else, crushed, whatever? And I know that he sort of said that. He sort of said the wound is consistent with blah, blah, blah. But I think he could have made it a lot simpler and just said, it's almost like if you have a piece of paper, right? If you have a piece of paper, then you could say, that is a torn piece of paper, and what you see there is consistent with the tear compared to that which is consistent with a puncture, right? So in other words, you're just saying it's obvious that when you see something like that, that's a tear, and then when you see the folds in the paper and whatever around this puncture mark, that it's a puncture, right? And you could even have used the example I've used, just make it comprehensible in layman's terms, right? All I'm trying to say is you don't need to go into like rocket science to kind of say, okay, look at this X-ray and look at that and blah, blah, blah. You could simply say based on the, and this is very familiar territory to coroners and a lot of doctors, based on what is happening to the skin, you can tell whether it's a cut or something else. And so that is going to tell you everything. That's like very common territory amongst doctors and forensic folks, forensic pathologists and stuff like that. And so although it was addressed, I don't think it was emphasized in a simple enough format, wasn't brought up during, I think, either the cross-examination or the redirect. In other words, the glass issue I didn't think was dealt with effectively enough. And I think he could have shown other wounds from glass, as I say, to demonstrate his point. He could have said, these are all examples of glass injuries to skin, hands, fingers, or whatever, and so on. And I also think it's ridiculous to suggest that whether Johnny's fingers were curled or flat, or whether the flung bottle was at a degree of 90 degrees or 2 degrees, that it would have found a way behind his hand. I guess it depends on whether you accept that that injury was from the front or from the back. So if you don't accept it was from the front, then maybe you could say it came from the side. I don't know, but I just think it's ridiculous to sort of make the argument whether his finger was like this or like that. It's still being hit from the front. That's just my thinking. And so the final thing I want to say is it may have helped the jury to see a few simple diagrams or illustrations showing the imputed trajectory of the bottle. So literally illustrating what's being spoken about instead of making hand gestures and describing things. Show a picture of Johnny Depp demonstrating in court, like take a screen grab or show a photo, and then show the finger, but almost not in the photographic form, but in almost a cartoon form in a way. In other words, a sort of a diagram of the finger or an outline thing of the finger. Because the jury aren't doctors, the jury are laymen, and they're trying to figure out what's going on in a photo where it's very obvious to the doctor. In reality, Johnny didn't seem sure of himself, I thought, whether his fingers were flat or curled, because you could actually argue that when he demonstrated it, in some they were flat, in others they were curled, and in some fingers were curled and others weren't. So it's sort of all three of those. And so now I'm going to give you my opinion on what I think happened, right? So, so it's like Johnny's version was that a vodka bottle was thrown at him. This doctor's version is that didn't happen, but doesn't really say what did happen. So I'm going to give you my opinion on what I think could have happened. In my opinion, what likely happened, it's based on the fact that it was only the tip of the middle finger that was severed and crushed. So to me, it's significant that if you look at my hand, for example, this is the longest finger. So that's something that stands out. The fact that my middle finger is longer than all the other fingers, longer, right? And so you've got to ask, in what situation where one finger is longer than the other, could that finger get in the way of something? Could that finger get caught in something, right? In other words, in what way could you have a natural idiosyncrasy like that causing something obvious to happen, right? In the scenario that he's given where a bottle is thrown, there's no reason to think, well, it could have been the little finger, it could have been the thumb, but the fact that it's the middle finger, just follow me in what I'm saying here. The fact that it's the middle finger and none of the other fingers are injured, to me is a bit problematic. If it was the little finger that was injured, you could sort of argue that, well, there are no fingers on this side, so maybe that's why. Maybe the projectile hit over here, and then this finger absorbed the brunt. Same applies to the thumb. But the fact that the middle finger is surrounded by fingers, you kind of got to wonder, why wouldn't any other fingers get damaged in a shattering like that, right? And so take the logic of what is idiosyncratic about the middle finger, what's longer than all the others. So in what situation can a finger that's longer than all the others just naturally get injured, right? Now, you take that reasoning, but then you also need to anchor it in the facts of the case. So you need to go and study up on that. Bria says, I saw a list of the jury and they were all East Asian men between 30 to 45 years old, 2 females, 1 Asian. Wow, that's interesting. Okay. And the other thing is, you've got to decide whether you accept the doctor's expert assessment that the finger was crushed, right? So if you say it was cut, then if you say it was cut and I insist that it was cut, then you don't really need to listen to the rest. You can kind of just stop the video and go, that's his opinion. But if you say, okay, I'm willing to concede that it may have been crushed, maybe even by a bottle, but it was crushed by something. How was it crushed? Now, as I say, you've got to take this reasoning into the facts of the case. Johnny said that he lied to the emergency room doctors in Australia when he said he smashed his finger in some accordion door. Now, listen to those words. Smashed, not cut his finger, smashed his finger. He doesn't say much more than that. I don't know quite what he means, whether he means someone else was trying to close the door, he was trying to close the door, but one supposes that the door was closing, right? I can also tell you, in my home, I've got kind of accordion type security gate. and I've actually caught my finger in that, just because I've sometimes got to push my hand through that to unlock or lock. And there are a couple of times where I've pinched my finger in that. So I've experienced that as a sort of a normal thing. I can also tell you, when I was a little boy, I'm a little bit ashamed to say this because it's not a great thing. But when I was a little boy, I remember I was kind of in the passageway, and there was like a door with a hinge, right? So a door, and then the wall is here, and then there was sort of a hinge there and a hinge there. And for whatever reason, I put my fingers between the door and the hinge and the wall. And of course, I was a little boy, maybe 8 or 9 years old, and just fiddling around. But the reason I was doing it was my mother was on the phone, and I wanted to talk to her about something. I was waiting for her to get off the phone. So I was sort of hanging around, and at some point my mom just got impatient with me, like, stop hanging around. And instead of just saying to me, it's private or I'm talking, she just sort of stepped forward and swung the door closed. And of course my fingers were between the door and the side. And I think I came very, very close to my fingers being amputated that day. The amazing thing was, maybe the wood was soft, but the door almost swung closed, and the bone in my fingers was fortunately, strong enough to withstand that. And the door almost swung closed and then swung back open. And obviously shortly after that, my mom put the phone down and attended to a screaming child, right? I'm just saying it does happen. And what that would have been, if it had been any worse, would have been crushed bone, right? Would have been not cut off bone, crushed, right? So Johnny himself said, I told the emergency doctors in Australia that I smashed my finger in some accordion doors. Why did he say that? In other words, he admitted that he didn't tell the truth. He said, I did that to protect Amber. I didn't want to get her into trouble. I've got a little bit of a problem with that, because he says that Amber also stubbed a cigarette out on his face. So if she'd just done that, why would he want to defend her? Or if he defended her and then she stubbed the cigarette out, why would he not say, look, it's actually her, she did it? I don't know. I can't imagine anyone who would let someone do that and then you would still sort of protect them. So him giving this first version, so he actually gives two versions. The first version is he smashed his finger in some accordion doors, and the second version is that she threw him with a bottle. But the first version does align with the idea of it being crushed, for example, by a door. And in my view, that is what happened. So firstly, the middle finger, as I say, is the longest finger. If the accordion door closed and he either had his hand on it or was withdrawing it, the longest digit would be the most susceptible to being caught in it, which would explain the lack of injury to all the others. Does that make sense? It also accounts for how and why the underside of the finger was effectively chopped off, right? Secondly, in his own version of events, discussing the night of the incident, this is quite important. And this is when he lost his finger, Depp said, the house they'd rented for me, these are Depp's own words, the house they'd rented for me in Australia was quite a large place. I think I ended up locking myself in at least 9 bedrooms, bathrooms that day, as she was banging on the doors and something about obscenities, right? So what he's admitting is that there was a lot of doors, door traffic, if you will, doors opening and closing. And so there you have at least what I call plenty of opportunity for a finger to get caught in the door. It's also possible that it's none of these. It's also possible that it's not a bottle and it's not a door and it's something else that we simply just don't know. But I do think it's more likely to be a door than glass / a bottle. That's just my view. So I think saying that it was a large place with many rooms and there was banging of doors going on, I think that's an admission that there was plenty of opening and closing of doors, and that then creates multiple opportunities for that to have taken place through the course of the day. That's my assessment. So are there any of you here who thought that it was glass and now you don't? And if there is, put up a 1. So I've changed your mind a little bit or made you think that it might be a little bit different, put up a 1. If you feel like, no, I'm still convinced it's this bottle, put up a 2. Let's see if I've done my job as arguing a legal point. Okay, so looks like a bit of a mixed bag there so far. Not there yet. Good to see you here. I never thought it was a bottle that caused that type of injury. Okay. So Terry, you still think it was glass that did that? Terry, did you watch the broadcast, or did you actually see the injury? Karina says my daughter as well, but what a scare. Okay. Okay, I see we're approaching almost an hour. I want to go back to look at the trial, although I wasn't really enjoying this last particular witness. Cecilia Yang says, how much further injury and damage to his finger may have occurred after the initial injury when the finger was, yeah, that is a really good point. That is a really good point. Funny enough, that didn't come up at all in this whole thing, but that is a very good point. Definitely. It definitely is a good point. Terry says, I think the bottle was heavy and shattered on impact with a bar where his fingers were curled over. So Terry, how do you explain, a object that's made entirely out of glass shattering, right? And it shatters on the body, right? In other words, it hits the body and shatters, and then nothing else is cut. Not the hand, not any other finger, nothing. Not even, I mean, how do you, is that just sort of, no, I don't, it's not relevant, or it's not logical that that would happen. Not there, it says, if it was self-inflicted, it could also give cause to cover that up. I don't think it was self-inflicted. I don't think this is Johnny Depp as the new Van Gogh. I don't think that's the case. Okay, so Karina says, I find that bottle scenario impossible to accept. Ian Kelly says, I think the bottle hit his hand, but he probably hurt it in the door, but under the influence didn't feel pain. Ian, that's quite an interesting point, because how about both happened? So how about a bottle was thrown at him, and how about something did happen in the door? Both of them could have actually happened. Terry says, I agree that it does seem there would be other cuts. Okay, so I'm going to sort of skedaddle now, but I want to ask you guys one more question. I looked at, you guys know about the story about the splinter of wood from the bed. And there's a litigator, basically a lawyer, who's also a kind of a woodworking hobbyist, who did his debunk of that. And I've kind of examined that in a similar way to what I've done here. Do you guys want me to, well, I don't know if I should call it debunk his debunk, but basically just apply some true crime rocket science to what this guy did. It's a lawyer who's a woodworking aficionado, whatever. And I investigated his investigation, and I just, I've actually written quite a long script on that, on just my assessment on what I thought was quite sound reasoning, and also what I thought it was missing there. So if you're interested in me doing that, let me know. The problem with doing this in a live format, certainly the way that I do, is you really want to sometimes show pictures. You want to show, for example, show the inside of the apartment, show images of the bed, and I don't have like a whole studio behind me to sort of do that. So I might do that as a standalone episode, but with all the relevant stuff. So look out for that. I might do the pictures and then also explain it with you guys in, face to face. Karina says that would interest me from the logic and the science. Bria says, I live for TCRS debunks. Okay, cool. Okay, so guys, thanks a lot for making it at such short notice. I might do a couple more of these just because it's a lot easier than getting the syncing audio and getting images. This is just a lot easier. And it's actually kind of a little bit more fun, this format. I also kind of get to engage with you, hear your thoughts and doubts and, whatever. Okay, Git from Sweden, thanks for being here. All the members who are here and the mods, take care. For the members, remember Van Gogh letters, it'll be a bit later tonight, so look out for that. Thanks, guys. Terry Dean, lunchtime trial lives would be awesome, yeah. Not there yet. Thank you for this while taking a break from trial proceedings. Robbie Robin, you're coming in just as I'm leaving. Anyway, what time will Van Gogh be? Probably about 2 hours from now. 90 minutes to 2 hours from now. Okay, Gathering Place, good to see you as well. See you guys a bit later. Take care.